Chapter 28. Hell was located in one of the worst areas of Oslo, and not only was it overflowing with immigrants and Antifa punks, but also criminals of all types. The guy who lived above Hell, I am talking about the record shop here in case you wonder, was a career criminal, and another one lived just outside around the corner in a VW T3 van. He had a building nearby with truck loads of stolen goods that he sold. As I have explained already, for some time I was there to help out Euronymous and the others working there so that his economy would get back on track and he could afford to print more Burzum albums. Unlike him and his friends, I had a car, so I did a lot of driving. And one day I left the shop for an errand. I quickly noticed that I was being followed by a car with two guys in it. Naturally, I was not all that familiar with the layout of Oslo, but I knew one way I could take to make sure if it was actually followed or not. Because why would I be followed in Oslo? It made no sense after all. Now I can add that this was not the first time I had been followed by guys in a car. The last time was when I was 15 and I was driving my moped. A car full of 5 young men followed me in a car, and after some time, I was sure that they wanted to beat me up or something, because they just kept following me, even when I tried to get away and took all sorts of illogical turns and strange routes. I had modified the engine of my moped, so instead of doing just over 30 miles per hour, it was doing close to 60, and they were following me in my home area. So I knew every in and out of the place. Also, I had never even seen these guys before, so I did not know any of them. All I knew was that they were following me and that they were all much older than me. Anyhow, at the end of a Sleipnir's Way, a part of the road had these rather abrupt speed bumps, so I turned sharply and accelerated over the speed bumps, literally jumping over them with the moped. The car following me did the same, but obviously the driver was not aware of the speed bumps, so I could hear the metallic sound of his car smashing into them and or the asphalt after the car had driven over them. And I was convinced that this would not make them any less interested in beating me up for sure. At the end of that little road, there was a steep turn to the left, leading into a field and a little forested area. The access was really narrow, though, so I knew they would not be able to follow me there. This was my getaway point. Because I drove way too fast, and because the path leading into the field at first rose a bit over a tiny hill of dirt, I jumped at least 5 to 6 meters with my moped into the field and landed in mud. I was stuck. Behind me, the lower front of the car dug into the hard-packed dirt as they basically crashed into it. And because the access was so narrow, the doors on the passenger side were completely blocked, so they could not get out of the car that way. On the driver's side, both doors opened and 2 guys came running out towards me. Their car probably had at least cosmetic damage, if not even more serious damage, and they looked furious. They were all dressed up in nice clothing, so I figured they had been on their way to a party or something, and the first one tripped and fell like a wooden board flat on his face into the mud. The other one did not slip and fall, but looked even more furious now. He basically got close to me and was only a few yards behind me when I simply gave full throttle on the moped and spun up an immense spray of mud directly onto him, and I literally covered him with mud. Not just on his face or a bit here and there, but from the top of his hair to the bottom of his shoe soles. He was completely brown from mud, so much that he stopped and just stood there for a moment. I probably blinded him completely with the mud. At the same time, I pushed the moped towards with my feet, walking it forwards, and whilst I kept spraying him with mud. I spun off. I was no longer bogged. I continued over the field and onto another road on the other side. I am pretty sure this was one of the most funny things that ever happened in my life. Had this been a scene in a film, it would have been too perfect to be even halfway believable, but it actually happened to me in real life. And I laughed all the way back home and never saw these guys again, ever. Or indeed their probably wrecked car. To this day, I have no idea what they wanted or why they followed me, but they for sure were up to no good and probably learned a thing or two about not following innocent teenagers. The problem in Oslo was that I really did not know of any such handy escape routes, and besides, I too was driving a car. I drove for some time, and in the end was absolutely sure that I was being followed, so I picked a narrow road where none could drive past me, and a few hundred yards in, I stopped the car. I picked up a large knife that I had in the car, and that I naturally would have preferred a lot to my little pocket knife that I used to kill Euronymous with if I had wanted to kill him that day. But by all means, remember, he planned to kill him, bruh. And I went out. The driver of the car immediately started to reverse. I started running after them to catch up with them, and he sped up. But at the end of the road, they turned abruptly and drove off, back whence he had came. Strange. Upon my return to hell, I told the guys what had happened, and shortly after the two men entered the shop, identifying themselves as policemen. Oh crap. I had, armed with a large knife, chased two policemen down the road. But they did not even mention it, and simply told us that they had received tips that this place was full of stolen goods. So they wanted to look around a bit. When they found nothing, they said goodbye and left. In reality, the tip they had received was good. The guy living above hell had his entire apartment full of stolen goods, as well as drugs, and he lived on the same address, only one flight up. They had followed me because I had carried something into my car from this address, and I had driven off, so they gave chase. Naturally, there was no reason for them to confront me when I chased them down the road armed with a knife. The whole situation was their fault. They were the ones not identifying themselves as policemen and following me. I did what any sane man would do. If you cannot get away, confront the pursuers and deal with them. I did by chasing them away. I technically had done nothing wrong.